I'm Moshe Feiglin. Stay tuned. Taped with Rabbi Doug is next.
We're gonna see Rabbi Doug. We're gonna see Rabbi Doug. We're gonna see Rabbi Doug on your TV tonight. But Daddy, I want to watch Monday Night Football.
Forget about Monday Night Football. There's no other thing we're going to watch on Monday but Rabbi Doug.
Yeah, Rabbi Doug on TV tonight. We're going to see Rabbi Doug. Oh, everybody talk about Doug.
Shalom, welcome to Taped with Rabbi Doug. We are here in Chicago, Illinois at the Standard Club, where I have often taped TV shows. I'm with Avi Jorisch. He is a senior fellow at the American Foreign Policy Council and founder of IMS. Why don't you tell me about IMS first before we talk about your authorship and your book?
Sure, so I'm an entrepreneur. I have a couple of different businesses, including IMS, which is a merchant processing company. We help businesses reduce their rates and come into compliance with credit card regulations. It's a B2B company that has grown to over 8,000 clients in the last few years.
And where are you located?
We are based in Glastonbury, Connecticut, and I have partners in Boston and in Glastonbury, and I'm in Washington.
Now, you are an Israel advocate, a speaker for the state of Israel and advocacy as far as your passions. Tell me how you got involved. Where were you born? What did you do to get into that?
So I was born and raised in New York City to a family of Holocaust survivors. And I've written a number of books on Iran, on money laundering, terrorism finance, on Hezbollah. And my journey with technology, and specifically Israeli technology, began in the summer of 2014. I take my family now to Israel, and we experienced the full totality of the war in 2014. And my journey with tech really began in July. I remember the first night of the war, I brought my then 2-year-old son down 4 flights of stairs down to the bomb shelter. And I could see how terrified he was, and so were my neighbors. And about 10 minutes later, we heard these 2 very loud sonic booms and knew that the Iron Dome had done its job. And at that moment, I was both extraordinarily depressed and very exciting. On the one hand, depressed because we were experiencing a war, a very unpleasant war. Syria was in the midst of a civil war. We were in Israel watching rockets come in, Hezbollah in Lebanon, ISIS in Sinai. But on the other hand, I realized not only was the Iron Dome saving lives on both sides of the border, the more research I did, I realized Israel had a tremendous amount of technology that was improving the lives of billions of people around the world when it came to not only in water, health, medicine, science, agriculture. Israel was producing technology that was not only based on startups, but a technology that was improving the lives of billions of people everywhere around the world. Israel is not only a startup nation, but it's a light-up nation. It is a nation that is leveraging its best commodity to improve the lives of others.
We covered in Washington during the APEC conference of 2018, we had covered the group which is in charge of the agricultural watering project that's going on in Israel, where they actually use infrared light to tell where water is needed and only use water exactly where it's needed. It's an amazing thing I've seen. I know this is your book, your latest book, Thou Shalt Innovate, How Israeli Ingenuity Repairs the World, by Avi Jorisch. Avi, are these things what brought you to write this book?
Absolutely. So let's just talk about that innovation that you mentioned.
It's
which
amazing.
Is drip irrigation.
Drip irrigation.
It started in 1965 by a man by the name of Simcha Blas. In any case, Israel is a country. It's the only country in the world to have declared water independence from the weather and from its neighbors. And this is from a country that is 60% desert. It is now completely water independent. And it's done that using a number of different methods. One, desalination. The country has 5 desalination plants, which provides over 80% of the potable water.
Let me tell people what that is who aren't aware. That means that they're taking water from the Mediterranean Sea, which is salted, desalinating, and using that water as actual drinking water and showering water.
Correct. And that technology is now being used around the world. Now, Israel did not innovate desalination. It was actually done by an American Jew in California who made Aliyah and perfected the technology in Israel. And Israel is now taking its desalination plants and bringing it to the rest of the world. California, the largest desalination plant in the Western Hemisphere, in California. IDE, which is an Israeli company, built it. The same thing in China and in India. That's innovation number 1. Innovation number 2 is this drip technology. Basically use these very thin plastic tubes. Of over 1 billion farmers around the world are using it. It uses 1/3 of the water, and it doubles the yield. Additionally, Israel is a world leader when it comes to recycling its wastewater. We tend to think of wastewater as a nuisance. Sewage is a nuisance in this country. In Israel, it's a valuable commodity. When Israelis flush, the water authorities remove the waste, they clean it 5 times, and they recycle 90% of its water. Do you know how much we recycle in this country?
3%?
8%.
8%. I want to say that I actually saw this chart. Israel, 90%. The next closest country, I believe, is 40%.
Actually, it's Singapore with 20%.
20%.
90%?
I just remember it was a
8%?
tremendous difference, a tremendous difference.
And then Israel leverages something I like to call rocket science.
Uh-huh.
You ready for this? It's a 2-button toilet. Big flush, 1 button. Little flush, 2nd button, right? As a result of these technologies, Israel has declared water independence. And this is coming at a time when its neighbors, both near and far, are experiencing water shortages. Let's take, for example, Egypt. Egypt, by 2025, is going to have a water problem of biblical proportions. It's going to run out of water. Jordan today is experiencing water shortages. Iran, in the next 20 years, over half its population are going to become water refugees. As we prognosticate, as we look forward to the next 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years, we're seeing a water-scarce planet. And here you have one of the smallest countries in the world, a country the size of New Jersey, has basically declared water independence and is in a position to bring this technology to the world. This is a small country, but if you look at the top 10 problems afflicting humanity today, the top 10 problems that are vexing us, you will find an Israeli trying to solve these problems. Again, when it comes to medicine, science, water, agriculture. And that is what brought me to write this particular book, because it is an inspiring story, and is a story that most people aren't aware of.
Tell me, so we've talked about agriculture a little bit. Let's go to medicine.
Sure.
What's going on with medicine in Israel? What is Israel not only famous for when it comes to the medical field and drugs, but what are they working on right now that is going to be earth-shattering?
So let's look at an organization called United Hatzalah. It is a first responder organization.
We've had United Hatzalah on our TV show, the leaders of United Hatzalah on our TV show.
So you've met my good friend and colleague, Eli Beer.
I know Eli very well. He's been on our show a couple of times.
So essentially, Eli did something genius, right? You have on average, if I were to have a heart attack right here, right now, heaven forbid, on average it would take 20 minutes for an ambulance to arrive. What Eli did was 3 things. 1, he created an army of emergency responders around the country, 5,000 responders, okay? 2, he gave each and every one of them a smartphone application which geospatially locates. In other words, it pings the 5 nearest individuals, just like Uber, to the scene of an emergency, and it gave many of them a hybrid ambulance motorcycle called the AmbuCycle.
Which I've had on my show also.
Which has reduced the time for an emergency responder to get to the scene of a medical emergency from 20 minutes anywhere down in the country to 3 minutes on average, and in major metropolitan areas, 90 seconds. Now, Israel has taken this scalable, leverageable technology and brought it to 20 countries in the world, including right here in the United States. Jersey City today is using this technology, but there's no reason why this tech can't be used in San Francisco, LA, Chicago, New York, Washington, D.C. This is an organization that is saving millions and millions of lives. And I believe that this is what we're going to see in terms of medical practices around the world in the next few years. You want to talk about drugs? If any of your viewers have experienced multiple sclerosis, the top 2 drugs in the world today, Copaxone and Rebif, are produced in Israel. There are 2.5 million people on the planet afflicted with this horrible disease. Over half are using these 2 drugs. Or if any of your viewers have experienced back surgery recently, they're most likely using technology innovated in Israel called Mazor. It's the world's first robotic device that essentially where the doctors plan out the surgery ahead of time, and they guide the robot into the exact spot in the spine. They have a 0% failure rate, and when I mean a failure rate, it has never impinged a nerve. It's never caused paralysis of any kind. This is amazing. And this also, when it comes to, for example, Parkinson's, Israel innovated. It didn't innovate the procedure, deep brain stimulation. But it did innovate where to place the electrode in the brain for Parkinson's. And also there's a wonderful company based in Nazareth called Alpha Omega, which essentially has mapped out the brain with sound. Every part of the brain emits a unique sound. And so brain surgeons around the world, including in the United States, including in Chicago, are essentially using that to get to the exact spot in the brain to pulse it and bring those who are afflicted with Parkinson's back to life, if you like.
Wow. That's absolutely amazing.
And speaking of paraplegics and quadriplegics, an Israeli by the name of Amit Gofer, himself a quadriplegic, innovated something called the Rewalk device, which allows paraplegics not only to walk again, but to run marathons.
That I didn't know, but I want to tell you, he was at APAC about 3 years ago, and he got up and walked, and it was the most amazing. You heard the room go. You know,
actually, was that
$16,000 or $18,000, him or one of his people.
Him as one of, because he himself is a quadriplegic. But get this: 2 years ago, he innovated a device that allows quadriplegics, in other words, individuals that don't have use of their arms or their legs. He innovated a device, a Segway-like device that allows quadriplegics to stand and zip around again. I mean, this is, talk about, you know, we have the verse from the Bible, and the lame shall walk again. This is essentially technology that is really, I like to say Israel today is where prophetic tradition meets tech. For 3,000 years, the Jewish people have been seeking higher meaning. For example, when I bless my children on Friday night, or when we do Havdalah on Saturday night, the blessing we recite is Hamavdil ben Kodesh lechol, the separation between the holiness and the mundane. The Jewish people have been seeking holiness, have been trying to elevate the mundane for the last 3,000 years.
Trying to live up to Kadoshim Tihiyu.
And what we're seeing today is what happens when a prophetic tradition is being repeated for 3,000 years, when a people is seeking higher meaning. You cannot repeat day after day, feed the hungry, help the lame, help those in need. You cannot repeat those day after day after day after day, and that not to have a deep and impactful impact on your people. And what we're seeing today in Israel is technology that is improving the world and making the world a better place.
Unbelievable. So now we're at technology, so I want to talk about technology. Let's talk about technology. For example, I have friends that work for IBM in Israel and friends who work for Motorola in Israel. Tell me about Israel innovation, not just in cell phones, because I think most people who know Israel know that cell phone technology has been advanced in Israel. But tell me what technological things are coming about now, and what things don't we know about yet that everyone knows about that aren't aware that they come from Israel?
Look, we're seeing tremendous strides happening when it comes to cancer treatments, when it comes to anything as a driverless car technology. Israel is a hub today for a lot of the technology that's going to be the underlying basis for driverless vehicles. I don't know if your viewers know, Israel has more startups combined than Canada, India, Japan, Korea, and the United Kingdom combined. Outside of the United States, there are more companies listed on the, there are more Israeli companies listed on the NASDAQ than any other country around the world. We are seeing Israel innovating at a very rapid pace, but not only to feed our latest addictions to buy things, but rather for technology, as I said, that improves the world. Let's take, for example, all of your viewers, I'm sure, have heard of something called the Ziplock Bag.
Everyone knows
the Ziplock Bag. There was an Israeli who made Aliyah from Turkey about 40 years ago, Shlomo Navarro, who created an acrylic bag, a Ziploc-like bag, that is now used in 100 countries around the world, that allows farmers to insert their grain and, without having to use pesticides, asphyxiates, in other words, kills bugs by removing the oxygen. And that is being used by farmers to improve their lifespan and remove and get them out of the cycle of poverty. Because what happens is you seal up this grain and you can use it any time over the course of, the longest you've had this grain stored is for 12 years. And so it allows farmers to both improve the quality of their life because they're not using pesticides, but additionally, they're able to exit the cycle of poverty because they can now sell that grain whenever they like, and they certainly can eat over long periods of time.
That's an amazing thing. So it preserves it. Is it an airtight thing?
It is an airtight seal, just like a Ziploc bag. It is an airtight seal.
It's an amazing thing. Amazing thing. All right. So tell me, when you think about the things that you talk about in Thou Shalt Innovate, tell me, what do you think is the most spectacular? What what is the most spectacular thing? Because the things that you touched on, by the way, are all amazing things, but they're all believable. They're all we believe it. We believe in Israel. We believe in Israel's ability. We believe in the Jewish people's ability to create, to innovate. What is the pièce de résistance? What is the really spark that's in here?
I would say it's the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. When you look in its totality, when you look at the number of innovations that are coming out of Israel, it really is mind-boggling. And what drives this innovation, I think, is what's the interesting part. Israel has amazing universities. It has tremendous diversity, not only Jews from all over the world, but Christians, Muslims, Bedouins, Druze, Sunni, Shiite. Israel is a very, very diverse country. Israel also has resource scarcity. It's this idea that everyone is aware of the resources, or rather the lack of resources that the country has, which drives innovation. There's also, it's a very resilient culture. It's this idea of chutzpah. It's a resilient culture that basically, when you've got nothing to lose, to quote Bob Dylan. And essentially, this is a country that is producing tremendous technology. To think that Israel, a country of 60% that is desert, is now water independent, is mind-boggling. When you think of the drugs that are coming out of Israel that are curing lives all over the world, I find that inspiring. When you look at the heart and soul of the state of Israel, the prophetic tradition meeting technology, and now Israel is leveraging its greatest commodity to help those around the world, I find that to be the most inspiring story. And not just in places like India, China, Africa, Latin America, but the United States, the back surgery, hospitals around the country. You look at the Alpha Omega, the sound, those that innovated the technology to allow brain surgeons to use sound to go anywhere in the brain, is used in hundreds of hospitals in the United States. There are over 400, I believe, paraplegics in the United States that are using the ReWalk device, and right here in Chicago. You look at Waves, for example, created in Israel. The cherry tomato, created in Israel. These bags, these magic bags, used right here in the United States. United Hatzalah in Jersey City. You look at the extent of this technology, it should inspire us all to make the world a better place. In Israel, there's no one story that really fully captures the state of Israel. But there's no denying that Israel is a diverse culture and that it has extraordinary innovators that are bound together not by religion, money, or stature, but rather by a desire to make the world a better place and save lives. And that is an inspiring story.
So let me ask you just opinion now, because this isn't your field, but let me ask you, someone comes along and says, Israel's innovations, they're startups, it's amazing. Do you think that American Jews should be investing in startups in Israel because they're being so successful? Do you think that that's a better investment opportunity for people in the United States and around the world than investing in businesses in the United States? What's your opinion about the investments in such a successful field in Israel?
So certainly, I left my crystal ball back in Washington, D.C. But I will tell you this. Investing in Israel is a wise move. I can't say whether it's a wiser move than investing in the United States, but there is extraordinary technology coming out of Israel, and it's certainly worth looking at. There are organizations like Our Crowd, and there are funds that are focused specifically on Israeli tech. Certainly something to look at.
How do you split your time between your business, between your authoring and writing books, between your speaking engagements that you go around and do? How do you split your time, and how do you keep up with all that? Because it really is a grueling business. You do a lot of traveling and stuff.
I just don't sleep. I just don't sleep, Rabbi. I also have 3 young children, and I spend a lot of time with my 3 young boys. I'll share an interesting story with you. One that I think fully captures the values coming out of Israel. As I think about my children, I'll share with you an interesting story. When and I talk about this in the book, I actually end the book with this. When my son was 5 years old, I came home one night, and I could tell that things were not quite right. My wife looked at me and said, "Your son did something very naughty." And when she sent him over to me, he didn't want to tell me what he did. As it turns out, he told a homeless man that he was a very bad man. I'll tell you, as a young father at the time, I was horrified. How could my child at the time say a homeless man was a bad man? So I thought of my innovators, and I thought about my own family, and I had him put on his shoes and his coat. And as we walked down the street, I asked him, why did you say such a thing? And he didn't know the answer. And when I asked him, what are the 5 rules? There are only 5 rules in the Jorisch home. And the 5 rules are as follows. 1, be a mensch, not a wilde chaya. And for your viewers who don't speak Yiddish, that means be a good person, not a wild animal. Rule number 2, do your part to make the world a better place. Rule number 3, try your hardest. Rule number 4, never ever give up. And rule number 5, try and have a good time. And when I said, Aiden, I don't know whether that man was a good man or a bad man, but I do know you didn't make the world a better place. So what do we do when we make a mistake? He looked right at me and said, we do tzedakah, we do charity. I said, that's right. We're going to find that man. You're going to apologize. You're going to shake his hand, and you're going to say, God bless you, and keep you safe, and you're going to give a couple $. And we could do that. We eventually found the homeless man, and we walked right over, and believe it or not, my son, my then 5-year-old child, walked right over, looked him in the eye, shook his hand, apologized, said, God bless you, keep you safe, and handed him a few $. And this homeless man starts to look at my son, looks at me, and then he hugs my 5-year-old child. You could tell this is the first human interaction he's had in a very, very long time. And we're chatting for a few minutes, and eventually we leave. We walk about halfway down the block, and I kneel down to my son. I say, Aiden, what just happened here? And he looks at me, a 5-year-old, and he says, Baba, I made the world a better place. And when you think about this really does capture the heart and soul of Jewish values, and I believe captures a lot of what technology is doing in Israel today. It's being driven by this idea that we not only have the privilege, but the responsibility to make the world a better place. We are 70 years after the establishment of the State of Israel. And when Ben-Gurion declared the State of Israel in May of 1948, he said 2 things. 1, he said, the gates of the State of Israel are officially open. Jews from around the world, after 2,000 years of exile, you are welcome to come home. The barriers have been lifted. And he said something else. He baked in a messianic principle into the establishment of the State of Israel. He said, I quote, it is Israel's great privilege and obligation to tackle some of the gravest challenges of the 20th century. He seemed to be saying that Tikkun Olam, repairing the world, was at the very heart and soul of the State of Israel. And when we think of Tikkun Olam in this country, we generally think of AIDS walks, we think of doing mitzvot, we think of doing good deeds.
Sure.
But in Israel, I believe it's come to mean leveraging technology for the benefit of humanity. If one person can walk, perhaps no one has to sit in a wheelchair. If you can save one person's life, maybe you can do it in 90 seconds, and maybe you can do it around the world. That is the heart and soul of this particular book. It is inspiring stories, it is rays of light coming from an otherwise pretty dark part of the world. Israel is a beacon of light. It certainly has its problems, but when you look at its story, when you look at the stories featured in Thou Shalt Innovate, you realize this is an extraordinary country that is doing really wonderful things on behalf of humanity.
Wow, well, I'm here with Avi Jorisch. We're here on Taped with Rabbi Doug. We're talking about his book, Thou Shalt Innovate, and about a lot of things that he is very knowledgeable about. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
I'm Yosef Mendelevich, and you are watching Taped with Rabbi Doug.
Welcome back. We're here on Taped with Rabbi Doug. I'm here with Avi Jorisch. He is the author of Thou Shalt Innovate, How Israeli Ingenuity Repairs the World. We've talked about so many things, and we just have another minute or so left. And I just want to ask you, you worked for the Department of the Treasury for the U.S. What did you do for them? How do you go from politics to Israel advocacy to being a commentator and a writer? How do you go from all these different positions, plus a businessman?
It's the life of an entrepreneur. I've had the great privilege to work at the Department of Defense and at Treasury. And when I was at the Treasury Department, I tracked illicit finance. And when I was at the Department of Defense, I looked at radical Islam. And my time in government certainly helped foster the idea that when you put your heart and soul in something, you really can achieve quite a bit. And when I look at my time at Treasury, which taught me a lot about finance, it only fueled my passion for business. And all of my worlds have kind of, in the words of Seinfeld, have collided in a very, very nice way. As I look at my own motivations for writing this book, it's brought a lot of my passions together. Israel, I spent many of my formative years living in Israel, and it's always been an interest of mine. Tech has certainly been an interest of mine for quite some time, and now I get to marry these stories and the idea of business as well. Look, I don't actually feature any startups in this book. These are all either mature companies or individuals that have had a global impact. That was what I wanted to feature. What differentiates this book from a book that I'm sure many of your viewers have read, Startup Nation. Startup Nation was about the economic miracle of the state of Israel. This book is not about economic miracles. It's about the impact the country's having around the world. It's about how the state of Israel is improving lives and making the world a better place.
And you're doing that by sharing the words about it. I want to thank you. Avi Jorisch, Thou Shalt Innovate, How Israeli Ingenuity Repairs the World, a great book. If you want to know more about the book, you can email us, info@tvrabbi.com. If you want to email Avi, I'll forward that email to him, and he'll tell you more about the book or answer any questions you have. Remember, check out our website, www.tvrabbi.com, where you can also see former shows on the web, as well as this show, and watch us on TV as well. Avi, thank you for being on the show. Hope to see all you next time right here on Tape with Rabbi Doug. Shalom, everyone.
Gonna see Rabbi Doug. Gonna see Rabbi Doug. Gonna see Rabbi Doug on the TV tonight.
This has been a Taped with Rabbi Doug production.